Hello everybody, welcome to the Space Sniper tutorial. In this introduction video I want to give you guys a bit of an outlook of what you can expect from this tutorial, what you cannot expect from this tutorial, and how it is structured in general, and a little introduction about this particular project. Let me shortly introduce myself. I'm Lars Sowig. I'm currently a senior concept artist at DICE. I worked for companies such as Ubisoft and Crytek. And we're gonna create this guy over here in this tutorial. Or let's say I rather show you all the techniques I use to create this. And the way this tutorial is supposed to work, and the way I structured it is that you will have chapters that are split in like explanation parts and usually followed by a demonstration video where I actually work on that project. You can see right here that I recorded initially in a sped up form, and I share with you my thinking process while going through the project, while working actively on it. But I also show you all the techniques I'm using, etc., etc. This tutorial is almost entirely held in 3D software, except for paint over chapter towards the end, but also there is no Photoshop part inside this tutorial, so please keep that in mind. But I share with you the PSD file that is part of this tutorial, and you can definitely check that out to see how I assembled this thing in Photoshop. So let me go quickly with you through my references and how this project got started. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about design, and one thing that is very important for me, and that is if you just look at all my other projects here that are also very related to space stuff, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they feel very grounded and believable in their own way. And the way I go about these projects, and in general, one thing that I learned about design and what makes design work really well is that if you have something that is very grounded, you create a lot of familiarity with it. Like people can relate to it, they have seen it somewhere, they know how things work and so on. So using this imagery of having something grounded, but then add this layer of sci-fi on top, gives you really cool and very well working designs that make people understand right away. So let me show you my references. I was looking at a lot of stuff like this. This picture here of this guy is basically where it all started. I figured out that as part of space travel training, people use VR simulations. And the brief I gave myself is having a sniper or a soldier acting far beyond the battlefield. So I was thinking, let's have him in space, or more precise, here in the orbit. So all I had to do is basically creating a spacesuit. So I had real life references of spacesuits, and I was looking at cameras, I was looking at weaponry, and I was looking at satellites and all this sort of industrial stuff, closing mechanisms, rockets, everything that has to do with space, pretty much. And I wanted to include the technology of VR, and specifically a VR controller. I mean, I guess you have seen that. I mean, coming from this, having a guy with a VR headset, to this is not so far-fetched actually. So again, very grounded thinking, I'd say. But I also wanted to have this sort of look here. Well, I wanted to give him some sort of jetpack. And the idea is pretty much self-explanatory. If you just look at the picture, you have a guy that steers like a robot arm with an even bigger rifle via VR goggles and VR rifle. So that's pretty much the idea. So how do we get from this point to the final? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use a base character mesh from DAZ Studio 3D, and we're gonna get it into Maya with its existing rig. From there on, we're gonna create a realistic pose. And one thing that is really important in these chapters is that we're gonna make the pose work with our rifle and vice versa. So we're gonna have the character literally holding that rifle, and we're gonna make it like very functional and very well working. And I show you some tricks here and there how to do this. And next, I'm gonna teach you the basics of Marvelous Designer, like my workflow of how I create garment for concept art. And after having this, you will be enabled to create your own fashion designs or spacesuits, if you will so. From there on, we're gonna work our way up to the head, where we're gonna create a face mask, and we're gonna add VR goggles and a headset. And from there on, we're gonna take our results and throw them into ZBrush, where I'm gonna share with you all my hard surface techniques. And eventually we're gonna have a short paint over phase, and after that we're gonna render out our final design, and I'm gonna show you all the tricks I know in KeyShot. I hope you're excited, so let's get started.